I did this story years ago, but, this time I want to get a little deeper into her life because Vanity was a beautiful woman and a sex symbol in the 80 seconds. One of the first female entertainers to push that sex way before you had Lil Kim and Cardi B and others. Vanity had that #1 hit song called Nasty Girl. I'm talking about she was a singer, actress, model. She recorded 4 solo albums and appeared in 17 movies. But, she ended up leaving Hollywood and became a born-again Christian. And, she tried to change her life, but all that drug abuse from her earlier days just left her body damaged. So look, let's get into her story right now. Vanity's birth name is Denise Katrina Matthews, and she was born on January 4th, 1959 inches, Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. She was one of 6 kids, which were all girls from her parents, and her mother was a white Polish Jewish woman and her father was Afrikaner. Now, growing up, she said she was destined to be a star. And her mother said ever since she was a toddler, she would have a brush in her hand and be in the mirror, just looking in the mirror with a brush in her hand. Now, she stated that when she was about 4 years old, her mother just left her on somebody's doorstep because her mother had met another guy who didn't want anything to do with a mixed biracial child. Wow. But then her mother took her to her father and he denied that he was a real father. Now, at the age of 5 years old, her father had asked her though, what do you want to do when you grow up? And she told him she wanted to be an actress and build a church for Jesus. See, she was already into that spiritual world, right there, at a young age. But her father though, he was a very violent alcoholic and he used to physically and verbally abuse her, and she would try to hide the bruises from her classmates in elementary school. She said her father would create things to beat her with, and he would beat her for hours. Wow. She revealed to Jet magazine in 1993 that her father physically and verbally abused her for years. The abuse caused her to have a negative self-image for 15 years, and he beat her badly. Wow, that's crazy. She said she wished she can see her father in heaven, but she won't because he's in hell. She said her childhood was horrible, plus she was very shy and bullied in school. Plus, she was molested. Now, by the time she hit high school, she started to become popular for her beauty. And her sister named Patricia was a star athlete at that high school, which still they say she still holds 9 school records. In 1974, around the age of 15 years old, Vanity's father ended up passing away, and she says she watched her mother fall deeper into depression and alcoholism after her father's death. And she ran away from home a few times. But Vanity's her beauty though. Her beauty had all the boys liking her in high school. But at that high school where she was, it was just prejudice. She said a lot of the guys wanted to go out with her, but they didn't want anybody to know because she was mixed, and that really hurt her. So, she changed schools. And at the age of 17 years old, she had won the Miss Niagara Hospitality Beauty Pageant in 1977. And she went on to compete for Miss Canada in 1978. She didn't win that one though. Then she ended up moving to New York City to further her career. And as soon as she got there, she signed with a model agency. She stated that after high school, she had the choice of going into martial arts or going to the modeling field. So she chose modeling. And she did some commercials, photo shoots, and appeared in a couple ads. And she even went to Japan to do some modeling. Then she appeared on the album cover for Nightlife Unlimited's 1980 Seconds album titled Let's Do It Again. Also, that same year, she auditioned for the movie The Color Purple. But Steven Spielberg thought she looked just a little too young for any part in the movie. And Vanity was heartbroken after that when she didn't get that role. Now, on May 24th, 1986, she released her second album titled Skin on Skin. The single called Under the Influence hit number 6 on the Hot Dance Club play charts. And in 1982, she was on the cover of Cameo's, the R&B funk band Cameo's 8th album titled Alligator Women. And she was also on Cameo's album She's Strange album cover. But then her opportunity to be in the music industry really came because she had met Prince at the American Music Awards. It's crazy because she actually went to the American Music Awards with Rick James as his date, according to some research and some reports. But Vanity said her manager gave her a ticket to the American Music Awards and she went by herself. But if she did go with Rick James to the American Music Awards, I bet you Prince was probably scheming to steal her from him anyway because, Prince and Rick James ain't like each other. A lot of people don't know Prince and Rick James wasn't seeing eye to eye at that time because they were both jealous of each other's music, style, and everything. But anyway, So at that award show, she said Prince's manager came up to her and said Prince wanted her to take him to the bathroom. Wow. And she told him, "No, I'm not taking him to the bathroom." But then she said Prince started following her around and asked, could they exchange jackets? Prince wanted her, they wanted them to exchange jackets. So they exchanged jackets and they realized they could fit each other's clothes, and hey, the rest is history. The next day, she and her friend went on a double date with Prince and Morris Day, and you know Prince picked up in a limbo and they started dating. Now, once Prince realized that she wanted to be a singer, he invited her to join his female trio group called the Hookers, which at first was initially consisted of his personal assistant Jamie Shoup and his sisters Lorene and Susan Mooney. But that group fell apart. So he wanted Vanity to be in this new group with his wardrobe assistant Brenda Bennett and Susan Mooney. And you know, like I said earlier, right about Rick James and Prince, they had beef. Rick James also claimed that Prince stole that idea about creating a sexy trio. Rick James was going to do it first. He had the idea of creating a sexy female trio. He said Prince stole it from him while he was on the Rick James tour in 1980. But anyway, Vanity didn't like the name called the Hookers. So then Prince wanted to change the name to Vagina, but he pronounced it Vagina, and Vanity turned that name down too. Then he came up with Vanity 6, and he gave her the name Vanity because he believed that she was the female version of him. And you know, the 6 for the Vanity 6, the 6 came from how many breasts were in the group. Prince was crazy. Prince was creative, man. Now, Prince also came up with the idea of them performing in lingerie, but Rick James said he stole it, but Prince said he came up with the idea of them performing in lingerie. Vanity said, one night Prince saw her in her underwear and asked if she wanted to perform in it, and she agreed and thought it was a great idea. Now, she did state that doing that whole sexy image that Prince wanted, it bothered her at the time, but she just lied and told Prince that that's the image she wanted because he told her she had to do it if she wanted to get paid. Vanity said she really wanted the whole old Diana Ross image. And on August 11th, 1982, Vanity 6 released their debut self-titled album, which hit number 45 on the US Billboard 200 chart and number 6 on the R&B charts, and was certified gold. That single, Y'all, Nasty Girl, classic number 1. That hit number 1 on the US Hot Dance Club Play charts and number 1 on the US Bubbling Under 100 Hot Singles chart. But here's the crazy thing though. That song, Nasty Girl, was knocked off the number 1 spot by Prince himself, with his own song called 1999. Now on April 28th, 1983, Vanity and Prince appeared on a Rolling Stone magazine. And you know, she had her hands going down his pants, which set the world on fire. But months after that whole Rolling Stone issue, they broke up. Vanity and Prince ended up breaking up around that time. And you know, around that time they broke up, Prince was making the Proper Rain movie. Vanity was supposed to be the lead in Purple Rain. She and Prince had a big argument for a bunch of reasons. She said Vanity said one was about the money. Apparently, she got offered a role too with more money. She got offered a role in Martin Scorsese's movie titled The Last Temptation of Christ that year, which never happened. Plus, you know, Prince wanted to control her too. And Vanity was the type of woman that you couldn't control. Prince also didn't like the fact that, you know, she started using the little drugs at that time. They had a bunch of problems and why that relationship didn't last. And plus, you know, Prince at that time was a womanizer, and he would cheat on her with different women, and even in his own band. Wow. So, she turned down the Purple Rain movie, and that's when Prince replaced her with Apollonia, and he also changed the name Vanity 6 to Apollonia 6. After breaking up with Prince, she got a record deal with Barry Gordy at Motown Records. And on November 10th, 1984, she released her debut album titled Wild Animal on Motown Records. Now, her first single titled Pretty Miss hit number 15 on the Hot Black Singles chart and number 13 on the Hot Dance Club Play charts. Her single called Mechanical Emotion hit number 23 on the Billboard R&B single charts. You know, Morris Day was the male background vocals on that song. Now, also around that time, she dated rock stars Adam Ant and Billy Idol. In 1985, she played Laura Charles in one of my favorite movies called The Last Dragon. Now, how she got that role, according to Tamak, who played Bruce Leroy. He said Barry Gordy asked him what female entertainer would he like to have as a love interest in the movie, and he told him that he liked Vanity, and that's how she got in the movie. And you know they did date in real life for a little bit after the movie too. Now, that same year in 1985, she posed for Playboy magazine. Also, that same year, she auditioned for the movie The Color Purple. But Steven Spielberg thought she looked just a little too young for any part in the movie. And you know, Vanity was heartbroken after that when she didn't get that role. Now, on May 24th, 1986, she released her second album titled Skin on Skin. The single called Under the Influence hit number 6 on the Hot Dance Club play charts. And she also was in a movie called Never Too Young to Die with John Stamos in a movie called 52 Pickup starring Roy Scheider and Anne Margaret. In 1987, she got engaged to Mlaya Crew rock band member named Nikki Sixx. Now, according to Nikki Sixx, he stated that Vanity was a wild black chick who used to date Prince. And one day, while he was snorting some cocaine, he saw her on MTV. He called her up to meet her and Vanity invited him over. He said when he arrived to her house, she opened the door naked with her eyes going around in her head, all high off drugs, and they ended up becoming lovers and drug buddies. He stated that Vanity taught him how to really freebase, how to smoke crack, because before that, he mostly was snorting and injecting coke to get high. But he said Vanity showed him how to freebase. But that relationship didn't last long. And you know they ended up breaking up because he claimed he loved cocaine more than her, and it was just a toxic relationship. He said they had a lot of arguments when they both were high, and she just wouldn't stop talking about Jesus. That was the arguments. Wow. He threw her out 0 inches the morning one time because she was getting all crazy. And he said one time he punched her so hard that he knocked her out cold. Wow. You know, Vanity, she stated in her book that relationship with Nikki Sixx, she was the gluten for punishment with Nikki Sixx, and also the punisher for punishing H, whatever that mean. Also, that same year in 1987, she played in a movie called Deadly Illusion with Billy D. Williams. And she also did an episode on a TV show called The New Mike Hammer, and she did an episode on Miami Vice. In April 1988, she appeared nude for Playboy again for the second time, and she stated that the only reason she did it was because she needed the money at the time. Also that same year, in 1988, she played Sydney Ash in the movie titled Action Jackson, starring Carl Weathers. She said, right after that movie, Action Jackson, she had checked herself into rehab for her cocaine addiction. In 1991, she did an episode on an HBO series called Tales from the I Used to Love Tales from the Two. The following year, in 1992, she did an episode on Highlander, the series. But that was the same year she became a born-again Christian. Now, how that happened? She was working on a movie called Da Vinci's War, and actor Sam J. Jones had a very deep conversation with her about her life, and he invited her to his church to read the Bible. And once she did that, her whole life just changed, and she became a born-again Christian, and she dropped the name Vanity and started going by her birth name, Denise Matthews. And she started going to church all around the world, sharing her testimony about how she changed her life. But then in 1994, she relapsed on drugs, and she was hospitalized for 3 months and almost died from kidney failure from an accidental drug overdose. She had to be rushed to the hospital, and doctors said she only had 3 days to live while she was on life support. Wow. She had 2 bad kidneys, internal bleeding with blood clots on the brain, high blood pressure. She was blind. She had a heart attack and a stroke. Wow, that's crazy. But she stated that in that moment, Jesus spoke to her and offered her a second chance if only she would walk away from that vanity lifestyle for good. After that, she recovered, got better, and she really walked away from Hollywood entirely. She got rid of everything that she accomplished as Vanity. She said she threw out about thousands of tapes of her interviews, every tape, video, everything. She got rid of all the stuff she had. In 1995, she ended up marrying a football player named Anthony Smith of the Oakland Raiders. Vanity had met him while he was doing some charity, community work, and helping young kids. And 3 days later, she proposed to him. They got married. Wow. But, that relationship didn't last long, and, they argued a lot. One of the arguments, though they argued a lot about, was Vanity started inviting homeless people to their household. And Anthony Smith, he won't have that. Anthony Smith, he had a lot of issues too. And so they ended up getting divorced in 1996, which was a good thing. I'm glad they divorced because Anthony Smith was charged with 4 murders right after that. Wow. He killed 4 people in 1997. After her kidney transplant, Vanity dedicated the rest of her life to Christ. She started doing speaking engagements at churches worldwide, and she headed Pure Hearts Ministries in Fremont, California. You know, it got to the point where she would apologize for things she used to do and say, especially for her music. In one of her sermons, she said, that song Nasty Girl was just stupid, and telling people don't listen to that stuff like that no more. In 2010, she released her autobiography book titled Blame It on Vanity, Hollywood, Hell and Heaven. She published the book herself. In 2015, she was diagnosed with SEP, which is a severe inflammation of the small intestines. It's a severely painful kidney condition. And that's when she set up a GoFundMe page to pay for her medical treatment. And her goal was to raise over $50,000. But she ended up raising about $6,599 because on February 15th, 2016, Vanity died from kidney failure, y'all. She died from kidney failure. You know, during her last days, she ended up falling sick during the night and she ended up on life support. She passed away in the hospital. Man, it was reported that she died after a long battle with kidney problems caused by substance abuse. All them years of old drugs, alcohol just caught up with her, y'all, man. And, she had left her state, most of her state to her church and some to her family. It's crazy because you know what's crazy? Prince died a couple months later on April 21st, 2016. Wow, they were both 57 years old. That's crazy. And there's supposed to be a biopic movie made about her life titled Nasty Girl, the Denise Matthews story. I heard Tasha Arnold was supposed to be one of the executive producers on that movie. That was a while back, so I ain't heard nothing else since. But man, Vanity was so beautiful, man. But she lived a wild life. Wild life. 57 years old, y'all. She was 57. Rest in peace, Vanity.